With the spread of the novel coronavirus, not just across Trinidad and Tobago, the wider Caribbean and the world, but also around the media, it's spread across news outlets across Trinidad and Tobago. It's really enveloped the way that we've done journalism over the last 2 months. It's difficult to have seen, or at least put together a measuring stick of who's in the lead in the race to win the elections at the end of this year. So this morning we're trying to build our own measuring stick. We've talked to Brian Manning, we've talked a little bit about the developing issue between the National Security Ministry and the Ambassador of the United States of America. This morning now we want to get a pulse from the United National Congress. I want to welcome to the show via Zoom Opposition MP Rodney Charles. Mr. Charles, good morning to you. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Ryan.
Let me just get your perspective on the developments over the last 24 hours, going back to the last week as well. What do you make of the United States Ambassador releasing this statement yesterday, but also the opposition leader, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, calling on Minister Stuart Young to step down?
Yeah. Our position is that it is now incumbent on Dr. Rowley and his government to take immediate steps to de-escalate the tension between the United States and our country. The United States, whether we like it or not, is the world's largest superpower. It is the world's biggest economy. It is home to over a quarter of our population, 300,000 citizens out of a population of 1.3 million. It is not in our interests, and clearly the tensions have escalated to a point where the government needs to take decisive steps to de-escalate this ensuing crisis. We think three things need to be done. That the government, led by Dr. Rowley, has to come clean on why the vice president visited our country, who accompanied her, what was discussed, and why was the issue of sanctions not flagged? That the vice president was a person sanctioned by the OAS and sanctioned by the Rio Treaty, to which we were signatory in 1967.
But Mr. Charles, that's the thing, though. The Rio Treaty isn't about sanctioning anything about sanctioning. It's basically a peace agreement.
No. It was it's an agreement of a mutual defense pact.
Right.
But there is a component of it which speaks to decisions being taken in relation to that treaty.
And those sanctions that were signed on were last September, where the sanctions against Venezuela. Okay, yes, but originally the Rio Treaty is merely about a defense mechanism for the region.
Yes, but the Rio Treaty empowered subsidiary organizations to take steps in defense of member states. And one of based on that aspect of it, a decision was taken last year to sanction the Venezuelan authorities. And once that is taken, whether we like it or not, we are party to that decision. Okay. And you cannot join a pact and pick and choose, cherry pick which aspects of it which you want to support.
Okay, MP Charles, I'm going to head to the 7 o'clock news, but please stay with us. We'll continue our conversation right after this. Welcome to our viewers in Trinidad and Tobago, and all of you watching us from around the world, internationally, regionally, we're happy to have your company. Remember, you can take us with you if you're heading out of the house right now. We're at cnc3live.com. We should also be streaming on our Facebook page, and we also welcome your comments and messages there as well. In the first hour of the morning brew, we really talked about and developed that matter, the ensuing matter between Trinidad and Tobago and the United States, in which we had international relations expert from the University of the West Indies, Dr. Anthony Gonzalez, telling us that this matter must be fixed, and fixed quickly, and it can be fixed by way of diplomacy as well. We also had San Fernando East constituency candidate for the People's National Movement, Brian Manning, talking to us in entering the political arena. And now we're talking and continuing to talk with opposition MP Rodney Charles via Zoom. Mr. Charles, thank you very much for staying with us.
Thank you very much.
We're talking about this matter that is ensuing between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the United States. Are you concerned that this will have an overarching effect and impact on the people of Trinidad and Tobago?
Of course it will. When one considers that we are the post-COVID economic environment is going to be challenging for most countries, including the United States, Europe, etc. We cannot have an irritant like this in affecting our relations with our major trading partners. We are not talking only about the United States, talking about the United Kingdom, talking about Europe, and we are talking about the majority of the countries in the Latin American and South American region. We cannot, it is untenable. And the quicker Dr. Rowley understands that he cannot, that badge-on politics will not make us achieve our goals, the quicker he realizes that, the quicker he should let the diplomacy take hold at this stage.
Well, what if we don't call it?
There are other issues. For example, the question of we have to be totally transparent about the sale of the 150,000 barrels of fuel. Today we read in The Guardian that the Aruban authorities are saying they had nothing to do with it. We cannot afford to be playing games. Sanctions, we do not want. And I want to make this very clear. The political leader of the UNC has said that we are not in the business of sanctions. In fact, we do not want, we would wish it never happened. But the government has to understand that this is not the Parliament of Trinidad. This is not the people of Trinidad which it can fool and talk down to. It has to be transparent.
Will the opposition file a motion for Minister of National Security Stuart Young to go to the Privileges Committee?
I understand that matter is being pursued at the level of the party. The question is, and a lot of things that we do in Parliament, the question arises, will it be allowed? Whether a motion of censure will be allowed? Whether questions in Parliament on this matter will be allowed, so that we have a full, transparent discussion on the matter. Something we have been calling for since January this year. So that clearly, we are at a stage now, Trinidad and Tobago, of all the CARICOM countries, is now in open conflict with the United States. That is uncalled for. Eric Williams understood diplomacy. So even in the 60s, when we opposed the Cuban embargo, he did not allow it to deteriorate to a level of open conflict where you take umbrage with the ambassador to the the U.S. ambassador to Trinidad. Those things are not done in diplomacy. In fact, there should be back-channel discussions between the United States and Trinidad and Tobago.
I know that we have differing views on how we can view the Rio Treaty, you and I. However, what if we don't call it badge-on politics? Let's not call it badge-on politics on behalf of the Prime Minister. What if it's having a bit of a backbone as government? Is it that the UNC will just bow to what America has to say, or will the UNC not be able to stand up to the United States of America on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago for differing matters?
We do not believe, let me make it categorically clear, this is not an issue of even Trinidad and the US government for us. This is an issue of principle. This is an issue of transparency and openness. We have called, whenever the UNC calls for openness and transparency, we are being told that we are subordinate to the United States. Let me make the point clearly here. We support Juan Guaido, not because the US supports Juan Guaido. We support Juan Guaido because Article 233 of the Venezuelan Constitution says when there's a conflict with the presidency, whether he is he's infirmed or he cannot perform or they have faulty elections, the president of the National Assembly takes over the governance of the country for 30 days. And his only job is to call an election to determine the will of the Venezuelan people. And that is the basis for our support of Juan Guaido. Not because, in fact, the United States is on the same page with us. And whether or not you wish or the government wishes to split hairs with the Rio Treaty, the majority, I understand more than 15 Latin American countries, supported the interpretation that Venezuela was subject to sanctions. So you could sit there and I could sit here and split hairs about what is the interpretation.
All I'm saying is
behind the rule of what we call real diplomacy.
I'm not disagreeing with you. All I'm saying is that the Rio Treaty, well, from my understanding, until we had these sanctions imposed last September, it was merely a defense mechanism for the Western Hemisphere. But let me just move on because I want to ask.
Yeah, it's a treaty of reciprocal assistance.
And I want to ask you about the screening process for the United National Congress. We are in an election year. How is the screening process going? It was happening just before the pandemic, and then the pandemic sort of curtailed the screening process for the UNC.
Well, interestingly, I was screened last evening, and
did you make the cut?
We screened for Tabakit, St. Joseph, Naparima, and a few other constituencies. So we are well on the way. We are well prepared. In fact, we have been calling for elections. So if elections are called, we are ready, willing, and able.
If elections are called next week, you think the UNC will win?
Of course we will. Of course we will.
What guides your opinion on that?
Well, it's based on, of course we will have internal
The PNM hasn't done a bad job, the government hasn't done a bad job with the coronavirus pandemic.
Yes, but they have done a terrible job over the past 4 years with our economy. I mean, at every level, on any index that you look at, whether it is the foreign exchange availability, whether we're looking at the Heritage Fund, whether we're looking at employment, whether we're talking about the collapse of our energy sector. There's no way that performance, however you may deem it subjectively, for COVID could erase all that kind of negativity. Increasing poverty. You should come to Naparima. I think you live close to Naparima and you'll understand the level of poverty, where people are sending text messages to the MP Rodney Charles. We haven't eaten, we need food, we need a hamper. My husband is out of work. My husband is a taxi driver and he's not getting enough money. So clearly, if we look at the totality of the performance of the PNM, I think there's no way that a country like Trinidad and Tobago could make that mistake and elect a government, the Keith Rowley government, for the next 5 years.
Let's talk a little bit, narrow it down to the San Juan Barataria seat. Do you think that you'd be able to win that seat? The PNM has some fresh blood there. I'm not sure who the UNC's prospective candidate will be, but it's going to be a very important seat.
Well, we understand that the PNM first thought about putting a Miss Borrell there, and then subsequently they put a gentleman.
Well, she filed nomination papers.
We wish him well. We wish him well. We wish him well. I mean, at the end of the day, it is what the views of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago those views have to be reflected in the government, so that we stand firm and square with democracy. So let the people decide. We are of the view that we will win. We have won it on numerous occasions. I think in the last couple of elections, there was only once with Mr. Ross that we lost it. But let the people decide.
Okay.
And we will see. I think the country will be in for surprises when this election is called. We are confident.
Besides Barataria San Juan, the PNM also has fresh faces in places like San Fernando East, and also, well, Dr. Lovell Francis is now out of Moruga Tableland as well. Are you concerned that the PNM is having more fresh faces on the horizon for this general elections as opposed to the UNC?
Well, one of the things you'll notice in the UNC, and here again, do not prejudge the UNC. I think
I'm not prejudging, I'm just asking.
No, I'm talking you generally, country. The leader of the opposition has taken significant steps to bringing young people into the United National Congress. I mean, let's face it, she's brought in Sean Sobers, who we understand is doing tremendous work in San Fernando West. She's brought people like Anita Hayes, Saddam Hussein. You look at the Senate of the UNC, and you see a plethora, to use a big word, of new faces. Something that is refreshing, and something that the older members of the UNC, we welcome that, because we have to look at the question of transitioning to the new United National Congress. consisting of the next generation of leaders. We welcome them, and I think we took the lead in that.
MP Charles, I'm running out of time, but I just have two very quick questions that I want to touch on. You've been in both opposition and government. How difficult is it, running an election campaign as an opposition? And I'm not talking here about the UNC specifically. I'm talking about any particular opposition in Trinidad and Tobago.
It is always difficult for the opposition, whether it's UNC or PNM to operate. And that is why we have been calling for campaign finance reform. Significant campaign finance reform that will take away the influence of the financiers in the party. And once that happens, the decisions of the voters will become more manifest. So we are for campaign finance reform. We understand that the PNM waited at the last moment to bring it to the parliament. We do not know why. We have been calling for this since the government came into power, and promised that campaign finance reform will be uppermost in their legislative agenda.
Also, the bail amendment bill, the Attorney General Faris Al-Rawi saying that it is in the hands of the opposition to bring it back to Parliament. Why won't you?
We will not be coerced by this Attorney General. What is needed in Trinidad is total bail reform. If we are honest and we go into the prisons, and remand yard especially, you would see that the large number of poor people who do not have the money to pay for bail, for little things like maintenance, little things like a small amount of marijuana in there, which is no longer an offense. The question is, we need complete, comprehensive bail reform. And I will tell you that if this bail amendment bill that he has brought to Parliament goes to the Privy Council, we're going to lose cases based on that. There is a Privy Council judgment which says that bail is in the purview and the remit of the judiciary. So when we hear talks like somebody commit a crime with a gun and they get bail and they come out, the magistrates and the judges have the wherewithal to look at trace the person who is before them, see whether he has a number of judgments against him.
I get all of that. I get all of that. And the UNC and the PNM aren't willing to meet each other at 50-50 at the midway point.
We are willing to meet with the government and discuss, but it must be respectful. It cannot be, for example, there are bills that have come to Parliament and we have suggested 8 amendments. Not one has been accepted. I have sat in Parliament and we discussed the line by line the budget review for almost 10 days, made out of hundreds of recommendations, not one accepted. So we will not be coerced and we will not be treated with disrespect, because we have to represent the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago who voted for us. And governance can only operate when both sides treat each other with mutual respect, so that he cannot go to the public domain and demand that we support it. It will not be done. That is not the way. It is the same problem we are facing with the United States. You cannot demand. This is the era of collaboration, respectful discussion, give and take. And this is something that this PNM, this Pete Rowley administration, does not understand, much to the chagrin of our society, and probably the cost that we will bear in terms of our relations with our major trading partner.
MP Rodney Charles, we'll leave it there for now, but thank you very much. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. MP Rodney Charles, opposition MP, talking to us this morning on a wide range of matters, including the UNC screening. He says that he was screened yesterday. We're going to take a quick break on The Brew. We'll be right back. COVID-19 Heroes is on the horizon as well, so stick around.